Ahoy, folks, and welcome to another GameXplain discussion. I am your host, Tris. I am joined by a very special guest, Nantanjex of Source Gaming, to talk all about Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Because, everyone, it's time. We want to talk about everything this game has to offer. No holds barred. We want to talk about it all. So it's finally time for a spoiler discussion. We're going to be going over characters, story details, and that includes the ending, and so much more here. So if you haven't finished the game yet and you want to avoid spoilers, get out. Anyway, though, before we fully get started, since you guys, our audience, hopefully, surely know how much I loved this game, Nantanjex, why don't you give a quick summary of how you felt on the game?
Oh yeah, this game was great. This game has lived rent-free in my head for like all of August, pretty much. Yeah. Played it basically non-stop the week it came out, and then I've been slowly chipping away at like side quests and all sorts of stuff now. I think on like a personal level, I think I prefer Xenoblade Chronicles 1 just a bit more, but that's definitely not... I think like objectively this is the better game, but I've just got such nostalgia for that first game that it just still seeps a bit higher. But this is like leagues above 2X Torna, like in terms of just gameplay and story and just everything, really. Mm-hmm. Like I really thought Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was like a fantastic game. I did a whole review for it on the channel, which was effectively summed up as jack of all trades game, improving on everything that the previous games didn't do right. So yeah. I liked it.
Yeah, and I think that's excellent, honestly. I mean, that now establishes where we both stand with this honestly fantastic game. Mm-hmm. Because the best way to put it is Xenoblade has been very divisive to its fans. Some people love 1 and can't stand 2. Some people are completely flipped around and love 2 but can't stand 1. But generally, everyone's been really, really liking 3. So, kind of rounds that out nicely and makes her a great discussion point here. Because
there's a lot this game does right and very little it does wrong, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I'm sure we'll discuss some different elements that maybe we agree on, maybe we disagree on as we get, through our little itinerary here. But I'm going to start us off light here, just for something fun. Who was your favorite hero character in the entire game? Because there's a lot of them. And this includes the 2 special post-game ones that, as soon as I saw them in the final boss, I'm like, oh, they gotta be heroes.
Oh, I had the exact same thing. I was like, oh no, the second they appear in that final section, I was like, oh yeah, no, this game has post-game heroes. There's definitely no way they made unique models for them just for them to appear in this fight. Mm-hmm. And I was right.
Yep. Now, I was a little worried they were just going to be DLC, but it was great seeing them actually here. But I will let you go first on any of your favorite heroes.
So a lot of the heroes are really good in this game, which makes it really hard to pick a favorite. There's like, which one's my favorite personality-wise? Which one do I think has the best story? Which one I think is the most useful for the heroes? Like, who has the best class?
Yeah.
But I think the one who sits on my favorite list is probably Gray from
Gray
the city.
Is fantastic.
Gray is great. It was a fake Solid Snake man, just being really great. I really like his relationship with Uni. Mm-hmm. I think they're really funny together. His mission his like Ascension quest is pretty good, where you meet his wife and all this, and the game's trying to frame it as like she's a traitor. Mm-hmm. And Gray the whole time you're just like, oh, is he being betrayed? And then at the end he's like, no, I knew all the time it was this was all a setup.
I love the way his personality is. He just seems tired of all of it the whole time. But the old daily grind. Here we go.
He takes no shit. But it also means it's really funny when he gets flustered. The start of his Ascension quest where Uni's like, do you have any babies? And he's like, oh, what? It's great. I love it. But yeah, no, and Gray's class, Full Metal Jaguar, is like one of my favorite classes in this game.
It's fun.
It's just a fun class. It's a cool reference to Xenoblade Chronicles X, having everything from that game, even the overdrive mechanic, bedded into it. It's just really neato. So I think he's probably my favorite hero. But like I said, they're all good. The hero I use the most is probably Fiona, because her class is like absolutely busted.
Yeah, really.
The support side.
It is really, really good.
Yeah.
And I do just want to know, I always find, like, looking back on Gray's Ascension quest, it's so funny to me because his wife's model is one of, like, the generic NPC models, but, like, with a different hair color from the rest of them. But it's so funny to me that, like, I wish they just put in just a little bit extra, like, different outfit, something for her. Because it's really funny walking around the city and there's like 3 different people that look just like his wife, but the only difference is the exact hair color.
She's got the red hair.
Yep.
That's it. I had this kind of thing recently because I was watching a streamer play the start of the game. A YouTuber I watch who I know is a big fan of the first Xenoblade Chronicles, and I really like his videos. And so I just caught a bit of it, and I watched the opening cutscene again through that. And I didn't realize then, well, I mean, I realized when watching, but not at the start, obviously, that almost all of the NPCs that appear in the city before the 2 worlds collide, and you see Noah, etc. as kids, are like all NPCs that you find at the city. Like, you see Garrett there, you see like a bunch of the original Ouroboros, like 6, you know, the ones that were chosen before our gang came in and stole power from them effectively.
The original candidates.
Yeah, they're just like you reusing all of the city characters in this opening scene. And it's really like distracting.
Yeah,
when you run.
Yeah. That definitely is distracting when you think about the implications of the world and the ending, which we'll get to later, because you shouldn't be able to see or recognize them there, but then again, they are the generic look. You see multiples of them all around anyway, for the most part. But yeah, no. I love the city as a location. I wish the song looped better because you hear the hard cut when it doesn't. But
yeah, that's true.
the characters there are really fantastic. And Gray, I love that you can get Gray so much earlier and he's so mysterious, but then like it all comes together with the city.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw him, I like knew immediately that he had to be from the city.
Oh yeah,
because like he's clearly not associated with anyone else, and the fact that he hides his face, I was immediately like, oh, it's because he's probably old like Vandam is. So he's probably really obviously from the same place Vandam is, and I was right. That's why when I first got to the city, my first instinct was, I'm just going to swap out whichever hero I have with Gray, because I'm sure he has unique dialogue, and he does. When you walk around like the Founders area, he like makes a comment about how everyone needs to be on their best behavior. And stuff like that, which was fun. And then I found him just wandering around the city when I wasn't using him at one point. And I was like, so this is where you hide out. This is it.
I actually really like that though, that you can find the heroes like when they're not with you in their like natural areas, like where they normally should be found. But it's nice to see that confirmation for Gray.
Yeah.
So you mentioned also your favorite class, and well, I have a whole separate section for like our favorite classes to play because, oh man, the heroes and the classes themselves are like, sometimes they're like night and day for some of them. But for my favorite hero, I had so much trouble trying to like isolate this down. I actually listed out multiple, so if you have others, like you're totally fine to say them.
Well, you go first, and then I'll list any like honorable mentions.
Yeah.
That have been brought up.
I have to say though, Ashira is so funny. Like she's this really sick character in multiple ways of that definition. Like she's just badass, but also kind of messed up, honestly. bit of a bloodlust from her. Well, more than a bit, and her entire colony. But they're really well written characters, and especially with their Ascension quest, I like this weird friendship she has with Uni, where they're kind of willing to push each other to limits, but also like not wanting to put up with BS from each other. It's really fascinating. I also love that Ashira has all of Dunban's art. Not all of, but she has a bunch of Dunban's art from Xenoblade
Blossom
1.
Dance. It took me way too long to realise that. That's what it was. I was like, oh, I see. Because in my head I'd already like, oh, well, Mio's the Dunban in this game because she's got the evasion one. But no, Ashira has all of his actual arts.
She's got the actual arts. Not that she plays anything like him, but it was nice to see in her hero quest when she literally talks about a world strife. I'm like, all right, I see what you're doing here. I see. And now I just want confirmation if the original Ashira is a descendant of Dunban or not, though. Like, I hope that's the case.
That would be pretty good, because like presumably a bunch of these characters should have descendants, but there's only like none of them are ever confirmed, and the only one that's ever implied to be correct is Mio as a descendant of Nia.
Yeah,
but the rest must have some. I mean, presumably Shulk's descendant is one of the 6 founders, because the statue just looks like Shulk.
Yeah, really. It looks just
exactly like him. So there's obviously that one as well. But yeah, no, Ashura being a descendant of Dunban does make a lot of sense. They are quite similar, except that Shira's got like quite a lot of screws loose.
Which I guess that world will do it.
I was like not expecting that personality from her when I found it. And I wasn't like when Uni inherits her class, I was super surprised because I just wasn't expecting it. But it makes more sense when the Ascension quest happens.
Yeah,
and you get to find out about them. But no, Colony 11's great, and especially when you do their quests with the Keves city next door or whatever it's called, and you find out a bit more about them. They're one of the more like memorable colonies, I guess.
Yeah. There's a lot of colonies in this game.
There are a lot. They're all quite different, which is nice.
Yeah, they are. And especially when you compare it to like previous Xenoblade Chronicles games, there's not that many civilizations normally. But this time around, there's quite a few. And it's nice that while for the most part they keep to themselves, you do get a lot of like interaction between them all. That's really nice.
That is one of the best things of it. Like Colony 9 interacts with Colony... is it? No, it's the one that Juniper's the lead of. Colony Tau, I think. Yeah. And then like Colony Mu and Colony 15 interact with each other. You've got Colony Iota as a rivalry with Colony 30 that goes on. But that's Colony Iota, you have to like build up the relationship with every other colony because they send all the resources out. Yeah. And then Colony Gamma with Teach has a thing with Colony 11 and Ashura because Ashura just really wants to fight him.
It's good fun. It's good fun seeing that, and it really adds to like the world, which is so good. But to keep on these characters that populate that world, to go through some of the characters that I think really do deserve a highlight. Monica is so good in terms of her role in the story and the story her own quests get.
Yeah, Monica, I do like Monica. Between her and Gondor, I actually thought Monica would have a slightly bigger role, because she's technically an optional hero. Like, you get her briefly and then she leaves the party, and then you have to do side quests to get her back, whereas Gondor joins as a permanent thing. But then they both show up at the end for the fight anyway, so... Yeah. But no, I liked Monica. I kind of wish her Ascension quest was a little better, but I do like all of the city quests she's involved in.
I like her involvement in the city and the way that really shapes the different quests. I think the actual quest to get her, where you have to kind of get the lost items from when Van Damme and the others died, like that's such a good quest, and that felt like it should have been part of the story.
Yeah, we can get on that. There's a lot of side quests in this game that feels like they should have been a part of the story. But one of my big criticisms of the story is how some things feel like they should be part of the story, some things don't feel like they should be in this game at all, and all that, but we can get to that.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. But Monica, just as a hero as well, there's something about the defender tank classes that I really like having along, and I think I like building my team balance around having another one of them around. So Ashira and Monica were like often in my party and around with me. And I really like what they bring. I
use Monica much. I definitely used Ashura unlocks. Her chain attack ability is broken. It's like the best one in the game.
It's definitely up there.
Yeah, but I balance my team around having a third healer, because having the ability to revive allies is like essential, especially if you're playing on hard mode like I did.
Yeah, that's essential. Yeah. So do you have another character before I go to my last one?
Yeah, I I really like Xeon, to be honest.
Yeah,
Xeon starts off like, sort of alright, but his whole potato gimmick becomes very, very funny as his quest line goes on. But I also just sort of feel somewhat bad for him because like he becomes the commander, and it's clear that no one in Colony, like half the people in Colony 9 don't want him to be commander.
Yeah.
And so when you first get him and you run around talking to everyone, people are just like going like, oh yeah, like they should have put Kite in charge, or I don't know if Xeon's up to snuff and stuff like that. And he's like standing right there because he's in your party.
It's really funny,
they're
actually.
just not holding anything back. And I'm like, I feel really bad for this guy now. But no, I do like Xeon, and just the way Colony 9 grows in general. I think it's like his thing with Kite and all of that. I think it's one of the like better developed hero quests that you get in the game.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the stronger ones, I would say, and well developed. Well, my last hero in this list, just to kind of make sure I'm not dwelling on this all too long. And this really is just to spotlight characters that deserve it. Yep. Melia. I need to spotlight my favorite character in all of Xenoblade Chronicles, who now has like more appearances than most other characters in the entire series. Melia is such a good character in this game. She really, like, she as a character, like Nia, appears very late, but when she joins your party through the post-game, as a hero, it's so nice having her in the party and having her on a brand new adventure. And I loved her quest that really brought you around to all these different all these different areas of Ionios to essentially have a little diplomatic mission, but also have not just Noah, not just Mia, but like everyone in the party learn a bit more about her. And then you get that like really nice cutscene where she's like reflecting on the cast of one, like thinking of them all.
Yeah, that was nice. It was nice to have a cameo for the one cast because I felt like they got a little shafted in the ending.
A little bit.
To see all of the two cast, and then the only one Melia thinks about is Shulk.
Well, she says everyone looking at them.
I know, but
yeah, she doesn't have like a picture of everybody. She just has the Monado keepsake, which I guess is fair. You don't want anyone else using that, but still.
Yeah. No, I like Melia's quest. I thought it was a good one. I kind of wish there was a little bit more. I appreciate her reflecting on things, and I really liked how she joins the party, where she's like casually walks past the group and it's just like, oh, excuse me, as if it's not her, and then gets caught trying to sneak out the castle.
It's like, wait a minute,
yeah,
Melia.
But I think I found Nia's quest more interesting, just traveling around and meeting everyone. Like she's like explaining bits of the world that come from the Xenoblade 2 universe, and then she speaks to Gondor about the Vandam line and references Vandam in 2, who was like one of my favourite characters in 2 is Vandam.
Right.
So like I really liked that got brought up and highlighted. And I think Nia, like Melia clearly remembers what happens in the first game, whereas Nia sort of implies that she doesn't, it's been so long that she doesn't really quite remember what's happened. And because they really try to push the fact that both of them are like pretty
immortals.
Yeah, they're immortals, but they're both like lonely because everyone they've met has gone. But I feel like Nia's does it just ever so slightly better. But Nia's is definitely more about focusing on Mio and stuff because of that connection that they have between each other. And then her quest sort of ends with Mio being like, no, you shouldn't. Don't worry. You don't have to keep thinking that you're a relic of the past. We want you to be here with us, etc.
Yeah, exactly. And it's definitely interesting too how you had these quests for both Melia and Nia, and they were handled very differently, which I appreciate. They didn't feel like it was the same thing, but here's your Xenoblade 1 version, here's your Xenoblade 2 version. But it's interesting how essentially everything about what makes this world what it is, we only really get from Nia. Like, only from her. Like, Melia doesn't talk about that, like, at all. Melia just talks about, like, essentially, like, reminding herself how far she's come. And, you know, the journeys that she's had and how carrying on all the lessons she learned and passing those down to others. Whereas Nia's quest really is about, like, yeah, remember this? You see this area here? I know what that was before it was part of this world. And, oh, that over there. Yeah, I knew that one too. And, you know, all these areas about my world. And it's fascinating that we only get that from Nia. Because I think it would have been interesting if we got a little of both from both of them.
Yeah, I think I appreciated it because this is a game that's meant to combine the worlds of 1 and 2 together, but most of the actual references or implications of the first 2 games are either incredibly surface level, like, look, it's the sword, or it's Soraya, and this is the Erethiad Sea, which is obviously a reference to the Erith Sea from the first game, etc.
Yeah.
Or it's, like, so extremely subtle and not dwelled on, like the founders sounding like Shulk and Dumban, etc. Like, there's no in-between here. I know they went into this game with the idea that you don't have to have played the first 2 games to still understand anything. But I think they also did that in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 while also having, like, a really strong connection at the end between the first 2 games that tied everything together. This just kind of feels like, yeah, these are the 2 worlds you like, and so we can make the references, but it doesn't actually matter.
Yeah,
like, they didn't need to be the worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2 if they didn't want. If they could have just had them be 2 completely separate nations, whatever. But yeah, I kind of wish they had done more, and I appreciate that Nia has that, where she's pointing out things from Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and referencing them throughout.
I guess my real... And it's good to bring this up here, because Melia and Nia are, like, 2 of the biggest characters in this entire game, honestly.
Yeah.
It still feels weird to me that, like, so much about what makes the world what it is in terms of how your quest will affect this world, you still only really get from Nia. Melia kind of chimes in during the ending, and we'll come back to that in a moment, but it's interesting that it's still Nia that tells you all this, and I wonder why she's the only one that knows it.
Yeah, like, Nia's definitely more active in this.
Yeah.
The implication is that this world has been around for, like, 1,000+ years. Like, N and M became consoles 1,000 years prior to this happening, which feels like one of these ridiculously long period of times that fantasy writers don't ever think about how much actually happens in 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Like, it's just one of them pitfalls. Breath of the Wild does this as well. But it's implied that Melia has been trapped the entirety that this world has basically existed, whereas Nia, we at least know, was walking around and stuff 1,000 years ago, because she only went to sleep after visiting M, who only came into existence 1,000 years ago, I guess.
At least because it was after they had their repeated cycles quite a while, or quite a few times.
Exactly.
Let's use that to transition into N and M. You know, I know we talked about the heroes. We mentioned the classes along the way. They're fun to play. We can come back to those because we're mentioning N and M, and they really are, you know, part of the backbone of this game. Like, sure, Noah and Mio are your protagonists, but you also have a lot from Uni, Tyon, Sena, and Lance. Like, they're all main characters, yes. But it is so clear that, akin to Shulk and Fiora in Xenoblade 1, that Noah and Mio, and likewise N and M, are very important characters.
Yeah. All 6 of the heroes are the main characters, but it's obvious that Noah and Mio are the main characters.
Yep.
Like, they're the leading force for both groups.
Yeah.
And it's obviously reflected in N and M, and the fact that Noah and Mio are every single cycle always seem to end up in the same situation of meeting and then becoming Ouroboros, or attempting to become Ouroboros, and then originally losing up until the point that Z invites them both to become the Mobius with him.
Yeah.
And, it's definitely really interesting. It's one of those things that I like. N and M appear in, like, the beginning of Chapter 2 when all of Mobius are introduced, and you don't really think about them. And it was only when, like, Yoren shows up later on, and I suddenly clocked that, he's Consul J because his name is Yoren, that I immediately realised, that means that the guy who was being treated as a special Mobius, whose name is N, is obviously Noah.
Yeah.
But I don't know how this makes any sense. And then obviously the game reveals that in Chapter 4. or at least implies it very heavily in Chapter 4 and reveals it in Chapter 5.
And not to mention, I mean, he very obviously looks like Noah, too. Like,
yeah, he does.
they didn't exactly... And this is not to call out anybody who's watching this discussion and felt this way. I would be a little shocked if anyone was genuinely surprised by that reveal. Like, they don't really hide that one so much, and it feels more like a confirmation of your suspicions rather than a plot twist.
Yeah. No, I guess that's true. They try and hide Noah by keeping him in the shadows and stuff like that. They try and hide his face or only show him up, but you can sort of, just from the name alone, you can tell that that's the most likely twist, especially if he's getting this much focus on him.
Yep.
Like, he's clearly more important than the other consoles. He doesn't wear a mask all the time, for starters, so...
M appearing is what I didn't expect. Because we saw N quite a few times, and then M appears, and almost the first time she appears, like, oh my gosh, wait, that's Mio. Wait a second. Yeah. There's more going on than I expected here.
Well, this is one of those things where, because I watched the beginning of the game again the other day, like, Console N appears along with the other Mobius the first time it shows, like, the theatre room.
Yep.
Like, right at the start of Chapter 2, and M is also there with him. They're both in shadow, but you can still see their outline. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where you see them both together, and if you remember that, and you figure out that N is Noah, then you can piece together that M is probably Mio. The game doesn't really try to hide it, because the second it's super obvious that N is Noah in Chapter 4, M shows up like immediately, and you're like, oh, well, that's obviously Mio.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I think they're pretty interesting characters. I think the whole philosophical idea around N and how he's like, he chose basically love over everyone else.
Everyone's life, yeah.
And chose to live forever regardless of what his actual love wanted, and was willing to do all of these atrocities. It's interesting because it's like Noah. It shows that Noah has flaws, and it's even implied that our Noah, the main Noah, also has flaws. Yep. And he only really gets... It's not even known if he gets over them fully, but he only really realizes this because he sees N, and he realizes what would happen if he goes down this way. Yep. And thanks to a pep talk from Mio, who gets all of M's memories and can warn him about this sort of conclusion to his character arc. But it's interesting to watch him go down this sort of spiral to being insane, because he seems normal, he has a child, all of this stuff happens, and then he becomes Mobius, and then he kills like a whole bunch of people in order to have M also become Mobius. And then from there on, it's 1,000 years of him basically killing people to the point of it being numbness.
Yeah.
And presumably M not really showing as much love as he would like her to, and so him just telling himself over and over again that he's made the right choice. He basically lives a life full of regret.
Yeah, really.
And it's made him super twisted and sadistic.
And it's a dark story. Like, it really is. It's tragic. And that's absolutely not new to Xenoblade Chronicles, but the way this is handled is very interesting. And it does make me think back to, like, early game Xenoblade Chronicles 1, where before you learn Fiora's still alive, the entire party's motivation together is just revenge.
Yeah. That's one of the things I liked about Xenoblade 1, because it's such an unusual motivation for a protagonist to have. You'd usually expect something loftier and better, but no, it's just pure, I want to destroy them because they took something I love.
Yep, and you see throughout Xenoblade 1 the character development beyond that, but here in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, N doesn't really get to develop from that because he was on that same kind of path for far too long. Yeah. And the character development is our Noah learning this, seeing this, and deciding, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to repeat that cycle.
Yeah. He sees what will happen if he keeps going the trajectory that he's likely to go. Like, characters call him out on his, like, sort of lofty ways of being like, oh, we got to do this to save the world. We got to do this. Is it like? I think I can't remember who it is, and Gondor definitely calls him out on it in Chapter 5 before everything kicks off. But there's someone else as well who calls him out and calls him selfish for like what he's trying to say and do. I just don't remember who it is off the top of my head. But yeah, no, you can basically see how Noah can become N, and then thanks to Mio and thanks to M, he manages to get pulled out of that sort of potential cycle, which obviously causes N to then fall further into madness until his eventual boss fight in Chapter 7, where he eventually kind of just gives up and realizes.
Yeah, and it's actually I really liked the touch that throughout the rest of the game, after the big moments in Chapters 5 and 6, they keep kind of going back to Mobius, and N is just kind of giving up. He's just depressed, like every time you see him.
I mean, I get it, he's spent a century doing everything he can to stay with his wife, and then she kills herself.
Yeah.
It's like, what have I even been doing this whole time?
What did you think of that twist, by the way? The big plot moment in Chapters 5, end of Chapter 5, beginning of Chapter 6, the way that whole thing played out.
That was a good twist. I actually really liked that. Like, having seen a lot of things coming in this game, like Melia being a robot, or the fake Melia, and figuring out that N and M were Noah and Mio before the game sort of revealed it, like, I was assuming that something was going to happen to save Mio. I assumed M would have some sort of involvement in it.
Yeah.
And whether it was Noah would pull out like Lucky 7 or whatever when N pulled off his things, or whether the city would show up at the final minute to save the day. So when Mio actually just dies, and then the chapter ends, I was like left sitting there like, what did I just watch? How are they going to turn this one back? And the swapping around with M does make sense. My only thing with that is because it happens before the fight, it retroactively means that the console M fight, where she's possessing everybody in your party, is actually being done by Mio. Like,
it's Mio learning her new abilities.
Yeah.
Ooh, what can I do here?
Like,
I gotta sell it.
Messing with people. And especially when it gets to the point that Lance and Sena basically almost kill themselves, it almost feels a lot. I know she's got to do it so that N doesn't distrust her, but it almost feels like it's a little too much. It almost feels like the swap should have happened some point towards the end of the fight. But other than that tiny little thing, I think everything makes sense with the power that had been established, them sharing all of their memories, Mio becoming Mobius is an explanation for how they click. She gets freed of the 10-year cycle.
Mm-hmm. No, I really like the way that was handled, and I think it coming across that moment at like 1 a.m, by the way, and then going to cross the whole thing, like, I'm not stopping in between those chapters. No.
Oh no, you can't. You gotta keep going.
You cannot stop there. That was heavy. It felt very climactic and very big, and I really liked the way it was executed. You mentioned the moment with Lance and Sena, and I really thought they were actually going to go through with that. Like they pushed it just enough to the point where I'm like, wait, they're not going to get them out of this, are they? And I thought it would be something for like later in the game. It really shakes up the party kind of thing, but they stopped them just in time. I'm like, wow, they pushed it beyond where I thought they would there, and I really thought they were going to do it.
Yeah, there's something else in that cutscene I quite like. It's to do with the side quests as well. It's when X shows up. So I had done Uni's side quest already.
Yep. Which
X also appears in as a boss fight in that. So obviously when I had done that, they meet X in that side mission. So when she shows up in that story spot to prevent Lance and Sena from killing themselves and save N, they immediately recognize her. They're like, oh, it's X.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do it in that order. And if you go to the event theater and you watch the cutscene where they meet X in Uni's side quest, it's ever so slightly different because they act like they've met X before, i.e. from when all this stuff kicked off.
Oh, wow.
So I like that cutscenes are actually slightly different depending on whether or not you've done the side quest.
Yeah,
or
that's
not.
Nice.
Yeah, I wish there was an option to pick between which version of it. It just sort of assumes you've done whatever it is in the story first, basically, rather than it happening in the side quest first. But I thought that was just a really neat touch that sort of brought that cutscene up for me.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And especially, I mean, the impact of all of that.
Yeah.
Like, it's so impactful. Like,
it's an emotional 2-hour roller coaster.
Yeah, really, it really is a 2-hour roller coaster.
Yeah, Shania also betrays everyone in that whole
Shania
section of
too.
things. And God, they make you not like her throughout that entire section.
I really want to bring up with Shania. I don't like how the way they kind of tied Shania and Gondor and Sena all together. Like,
yeah.
I like how they're all done, but I don't like how most of Sena's development is reliant on those two.
Yeah, Sena has a massive problem in this game that her character arc comes way too late into the story for it to really like have a massive impact on it. Because I feel like the game focuses so much on the Kevis trio that you get all of their like tragedy and stuff like that early on, and then it can develop over time. Lance and Yorin is like a perfect example of something that happened. You find out in chapter 1, and it keeps going and it keeps developing until it concludes at the end of chapter 6.
Yeah,
like, and that's great. But the Agnes trio have a really bad problem of this, where it's clear that all three of them have some issue, but the game slowly leaks it out to you. And the only one of those three that I think actually hits is Tyon's. And I think part of that is because Tyon is the first one to get that development. Mia obviously has the fact that she's going to die in 3 months as like a recurring thing.
Yes.
But she's also got all the Miyabi stuff, and the Miyabi stuff is kind of just randomly dropped on you in chapter 6 and then immediately discarded. Like, Miyabi comes so late in the game that she doesn't have any quests about herself other than the Ascension quest. And it's the same for Kamaravi, but at least he showed up earlier alongside Ethel.
Yeah.
Miyabi and Mio's stuff really just feels like an afterthought to everything. And Sena has the same problem. Sena's got it even worse, because Sena doesn't even have a character that she can connect to from her past. Her only thing is that she self-doubts herself, and so looks up to Mimi, which is meant to replicate Shania's self-doubt and looking up to Gondor.
Exactly.
But because Gondor and Shania's relationship falls apart over this, whereas Mio is very much like not as bothered about it, it just doesn't quite work the same. You can't really say, well, Mio and Sena's relationship was the right way to do Gondor and Shania's, because Mio and Sena don't really do anything about this together.
Yeah, they're different people. They're more encouraging to each other. It's just the fact that they're different people. But it's exemplified in Sena's side story, because Sena's side story is actually more of Gondor's side story.
Yeah, Gondor's side story Gondor's Ascension quest should really be Shania's when Shania shows up. But then I guess what is Gondor's Ascension quest, which is pretty fun with the Turkins. Like that's a fun one. Clearly it's meant to replicate her dynamics with Monica.
Yeah.
Sena can't really have that.
No, of course.
But it means that Sena doesn't have anything. So...
And it's disappointing. I think the closest is the Sagiri quest, like the hero quest for Sagiri, because you actually get a lot of focus on Sena during that quest, and her drive, her motivation to help others kind of comes out more there. But it's a shame that it's in a different character's quest completely.
Yeah, and Sagiri is an example of doing a late game character right, because you get Kamaravi, Miyabi, and Sagiri basically back to back, all right at the end of the game.
If you do everything right, yeah.
Yeah. But then Sagiri actually has a quest line and stuff, and her relationship with Sena can develop, and stuff like you see more from them, whereas Miyabi just goes to the city and does nothing. And then Kamaravi doesn't even have an Ascension quest, really.
No.
You just have to take him to a specific spot on the map when you get to level 10 with his thing, and then that's it. And you also just get Ethel back at that point, and that's her Ascension quest as well.
Yeah, they do feel a little sidelined. It does feel a little sidelined, and I think that's an important part to discuss here, because after the heavy end of chapter 5 and start of chapter 6.
Yeah.
It brings us to the question of how the pacing for the rest of the game is. Chapters 6 and 7. And I haven't listed a note here specifically with the question, are chapters 6 and 7 weird or rushed? And I kind of think so. And I don't want to say they bog down the entire game, but it's when you reach that moment in between chapters 5 and 6, you think it's going to keep riding that high and sticking to that. And it really doesn't, not until, like, the final boss.
Yeah, I think it's worth... It is really noticeable that this is the only Xenoblade game to not have 10 chapters in it. Like, other than Torna, I guess, because it was DLC. Yeah. It's only got 7 chapters, and some of these chapters are very long. Like, chapters 2 and 3 in particular are quite long chapters. I think chapter 3 might be the longest. I'm not actually sure I'm not sure when chapter 3 ends.
It might just be a case of so much opens in those. And
so yeah, that could be it.
It opens it up because, like, chapter 3 is when, like, all a bunch of hero side quests are opening up. But if you just beeline for the story itself isn't super long. Like,
I know this is the shortest Xenoblade if you don't do the side story, and I think that's a good way to bring the side story in, because I think this game has a pacing problem throughout it, and it's kind of... Xenoblade's never been good at sorting out when the side quests should be done.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those typical RPG things where the tension is always escalating, and then the characters just diverge to do something super menial. Like in this game, you can teach a Nopon to play the flute. He wants to be an officer, I'm going to teach him how to do this, when, like, the world is ending. And it's particularly bad in... I know it's post-game and all that, but you walk around the world and people are like, oh man, that origin in the middle, surely destroying things. Anyway, how can I tell people about my potatoes?
Yeah!
It's like... there are more pressing matters, it feels like, here. Because this game's so focused around the fact that Mio only has a certain amount of time until she dies, and you meet, like, Ethel in Colony 4, and she's like, oh, it'll take you 2 months to make it all the way to Sword March.
Yep.
And the game treats it like that. When you do the Agnes Castle mission, it's been 2 months, apparently, since you left off. But it doesn't, like, if you just beeline the story, it doesn't feel like it's been 2 months, because not enough time has actually passed in-game for it to really be that. But also, doing any of the side quests and stuff, like randomly going off the beaten path to Colony Iota and sorting out all of their problems, or doing a pirate game with Colony 15, or going all the way back to Colony 9 and Colony Gamma at the start just to solve their problems when you should be going forward. It's like Ethel's 2-month prediction is like, oh yeah, it'll take 2 months to get there if you, like, you know, sightsee and stop and, you know, maybe visit every colony on the way, see what they're doing, spend a few days.
Yeah, really.
Then it will be 2 months, but
no, it's wild the way it's paced, because you're absolutely right. Like the actual, like, travel doesn't seem like it would take that long, and I guess the implication is, though the in-game clock doesn't suggest it this way, the distance between every colony and every campsite would be like a whole day at least.
Yeah, it's meant to be longer. I think it's one of those things that you have to sort of just put it out of your mind and throw it up in the air that this is just a fantasy game, just roll with it.
Yeah, exactly.
But, like, because they, for whatever reason, push so much into the side questing side of things, it feels like the party is just getting distracted constantly.
It does.
And it breaks up the flow of the story. But then, because of the way it goes from chapter 6 onwards, because it suddenly escalates so quickly from you leave Agnes Castle to immediately finding Nia, and then immediately having to run around the world and do all the origin parts, it feels like including the side quest there might de-escalate some things, or maybe delay stuff when you're so close to what feels like it should be the end.
Yeah.
So it's also not very natural to put them there either, even though I think some of the things, like Shania coming back, could have probably been implemented into the story during the part where you're looking for all the origin shards.
That would have made the most sense.
Yeah,
to do it
like
there.
if you just put one in the city, one in Colony Iota, or like one back at Colony 9 or something, you could have potentially reintroduced a lot of these previous elements there, and potentially had more time to flesh things out from that chapter 6 onwards so that it didn't feel as rushed. But as it is, you go and do a bunch of random nonsense like digging up holes in the second region, and then just have Noah's side mission randomly inserted with a completely new town introduced in the upteenth hour.
Yeah, that needs to be addressed. The whole thing with Mobius Chris felt really weird to me. Like, we had Mio's side story in the chapter before with Miyabi. It's like, okay, you know what? That's on the way. We know that's been bothering her for a bit. We know from the hero menu we gotta get Kamarafi back at some point. So it makes sense to have that there, and the way the flame clocks and the life cycles get addressed. It's neat. I think it could have been done a little bit better if it was maybe in one of the castles. I think that would have been more interesting if it was dealing with the Mobius and consoles that are actually like leading the castles to make it feel a little bit more impactful. But Mios feels a little more like a pit stop on the way to Nia.
Yeah, whereas... it's not even a dungeon. You just walk up, you just stroll up outside, and this research facility is like 2 rooms.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
You just stroll up, beat everyone up, and then free them. And then that's it. Funny, and Console Y is just like, all right, I'm done here. See ya. And just leaves.
Yeah, and then you compare that to Noah's side story in Chapter 7 when you're getting the Shards of Origin and Chris. So, like, you have some cutscenes, memories of Chris throughout the game, kind of.
Yeah.
But I think that would have been so much more impactful if most of those memories we get of him happened actually throughout the game and not throughout that one chapter. It felt very forced in, and I know this game being what it is, yes, of course, there's still going to be some tropes in some areas, but Chris's whole thing, destroying the Melia robot and being like, oh, Noah, I only became Mobius to hear your song again. Like, I'm sorry, when did you become an edgelord, sir? that one part rubbed me the wrong way so hard because it felt out of character for what we were led to believe Chris's character was up to that point. Even in that chapter, up to that point, it felt weird.
Yeah, Chris has the exact same problem that Miyabi has, in that they're clearly someone important to the protag that died and left a big impact on their life, but they spend like no time actually focusing on them until the final moments that they have to before they're reintroduced. And in Chris's case, he's introduced all the way back in chapter 1, in like the second cutscene in the game when Noah first sees him, and it's like very obvious that Noah was inspired by him. Yet they spend no time on it. Like, I knew he would come back. Like, I was expecting him to play a much bigger role in this. But when he just randomly shows up as a Mobius in the end, I was like, well, okay, they could have at least hinted at this a bit earlier on.
Yeah.
Now he just kind of feels like he's here. And you're right, his whole little edgelord thing, the game sort of implies that Chris, in a previous life, became aware that the whole cycle of things is nonsense.
Yep.
But they never really focus on it. It's one of the things in this game, Uni has like her whole thing, which again shouldn't have been resolved in a side mission. Her entire problem of she remembers her past memories and remembers dying and has trauma over that, and then it just sort of gets wrapped up in the side mission. That's where all the characters find out about it. So if you didn't do that, no one in the game finds out that Uni has these problems.
That's true.
And it's just it's just not addressed. So it's like Uni has this, and then you find out Ashura also has some memories of when she died in a previous life. So the implication that you take away is that Chris found out ages ago that dying is pointless because you'll just be reborn again, and if you have your homecoming, you'll be left out of the life cycle, and that's why he always chooses to kill himself right before the homecoming.
Yeah.
But this is all like very much subtext that you need to do other side missions to sort of figure out how people feel about it, and the game never really explains why people have memories from their past. It feels like one of those plot points that was meant to get more focus on and then just didn't, and because of that, other characters' stuff suffers from it.
Especially since it's not consistent either.
Yeah.
Like, not everyone gets the memories back.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if Chris had shown up earlier in a similar manner to how Joran did, and had shown signs of, like, this, and we got to see a bit more from his perspective, this might have, like, landed better. But as it is, it feels like a side story, but it's a side story put into the main game, so it's not really a side story, even though they call it a side story.
I think the only reason why it's a side story is to have the impact of Keva's castle now being freed as well.
Yeah, really I guess. I mean, my reason for thinking it's a side story is just because the other 4 have side stories.
Yeah.
That are side stories, so Noah and Mio have to have their own Ascension quests, and they may as well keep it consistent.
Of course.
Even if they happen in the main story.
Of course. Thinking on this further, though, this just, like, popped into my head, like, while we were talking about this. I appreciate the fact that Miyabi and Kamaravi coming back weren't because, oh, look, they turned Mobius too, because we have a lot of that in this game.
Yeah,
we have a lot of that.
We do.
Chris being yet another one of them. It's nice that not every single character coming back was because, well, now I'm Mobius, or something along those lines. I was wondering how
Kamaravi would come back. I really feel like they shouldn't have had his silhouette in the thing.
They should not.
Because
they should not.
Melia and Nia's silhouette gets added after you've beaten the game.
Yep.
So they clearly have the power to hide these icons until the right moment. So
they should have added at the start of a chapter which ones you can get during that.
Yeah, that would have been a
been
good way. Yeah, because Kamaravi, knowing that he's going to be coming, obviously, makes the death that him and Ethel have earlier on, just it kind of loses some of its impact. Like, it's a really cool moment. It
is a great moment.
Never once did I doubt that Ethel wouldn't come back.
Yep.
And part of that was because of the fact that Kamaravi already I knew would be coming back anyway.
Yeah.
And also because I knew Uni had been reborn, so there's like precedent for it to happen.
Yep.
And then like Ethel comes back as a child, and then they just magically age her back up again so she can be the same age as when she's a hero class.
And just as skilled, which is really
fun. Exactly. And it doesn't impact... This also sort of annoyed me, because it doesn't impact anything else. Like, I took Ethel to Colony 4 to see what people would say.
I did that too.
And Boliaris is just like, man, I must be working too hard. I'm seeing things.
That should have had a special cutscene. That should have had a special cutscene of bringing her back in there. The Colony 4, like, the council, like, the people of Colony 4 come together. They learn properly about the cycle and what Ethel's been through. That should have been a cutscene, but then, like, Boliaris taking that to be like, you know, you don't have your memories of being commander here, so don't worry about being commander. I will do it. You go with Ouroboros and save our world. That, I think, would have been much more special with how much of a big focus Colony 4 had throughout the game, honestly. That would have been very nice.
It could have at least been a post-game quest or something, because post-game adds quests in, not just the Nia and Melia ones. There's Triton has his final quest in the post-game, and so does Seeker has his final quest in the post-game for Agnes Castle. So they could have added something in for that, and they just didn't. Slightly related, but not unrelated. I really like Boliaris. He was a character that I first saw and was just thinking he would be like a very minor NPC, but he actually like is really enjoyable, and he's way more like apparent than and recurring than you would think. He actually has part in the final cutscene.
Yeah, you know what? Let's actually go to that too, because I want to note in the ending, like I remember, like, because I had to meet like the review embargo deadlines and such. I wasn't beelining for every single like Ascension quest. My goal was to get all the heroes, and I didn't do many of the Ascension quests outside of the main cast until after post game. But it was really funny going through the final boss, the ending of the game, and I only had the child Ethel at this point. But when they show everyone from both from both countries, from both games, standing around. You see adult Ethel there, standing next to Beliaris. I'm like, wait, when did that happen?
So they do show that in the cutscene. So a friend of mine was also playing this game, and he didn't get all the heroes before he decided to go and do the final one. And according to him, not all the heroes showed up in the final cutscene for him.
Yeah,
like he didn't have that. It just cut the part where it showed the 3 groups of heroes because he didn't have everybody.
Yeah, oh, that's interesting. No,
Yeah,
I definitely saw Ethel there, which was fun.
Yeah, well, yeah, she's in the middle. Yeah, I assume they must, because technically you do get Ethel. Then, then technically she would be there. But you're right. I had done the Ascension quest, so she was an adult. So
yeah, it was just funny, and that maybe she was only there because I did Kamaravi's quest and I got Kamaravi, and they just assumed, okay, obviously we'll get her aged up too. But I don't know, it was funny. Hey all, so this discussion ran pretty long, and when I say long, I mean we talked for nearly another hour from this point. So we're gonna call this the end of part 1, and you can look forward to part 2 soon, where we talk more at length about the actual end of the game, including Z as a villain, Origin, and so much more. We'll include various links for where you can find Nantangex over at Source Gaming down below too. But with that, we'll see you in part 2 soon enough. Make sure to let us know your thoughts on everything we discussed in part 1 of this Xenoblade Chronicles 3 spoiler discussion down below.